My landlord looked me dead in the eye, smiled, and told me my security deposit was gone. Just gone. No explanation, no paperwork, just a smug shrug, like I was supposed to accept it and walk away. He had no idea that $2,000 would end up costing him an entire apartment complex. This is the story of how one greedy landlord's laziness turned into his total financial collapse, and how I became the reason his name is now attached to a courthouse file instead of a deed. If you've ever been cheated by someone who assumed you were too tired, too broke, or too busy to fight back, this story is for you. Stick around, because by the end of this video, you're going to want to stand up and cheer. Hit subscribe, tap that like button, and let's get into it. The setup. My name doesn't matter for this story. Call me Dan. 2 years ago, I moved into a unit at Brookhaven Apartments, a mid-sized complex on the edge of town, owned by a man named Gary Holt. Gary wasn't your typical absentee landlord who hired a property manager and disappeared. No, Gary liked to be involved. He liked walking the property in his golf polo, clipboard in hand, inspecting things he didn't understand, and reminding tenants constantly that we were lucky to be living in his building. I paid my rent on time, every single month. For 2 straight years, my payment hit his account before the 5th. I never damaged a single wall. I patched my own nail holes. I even repainted the bathroom back to the original eggshell white before I moved out, because I read the lease closely, and I knew Gary's type. Guys like Gary don't respect kindness. They respect documentation. So I documented everything. Move-in day, I walked every room with my phone recording, narrating each scuff, each water stain, each loose cabinet hinge that was already there before I ever touched the place. I sent Gary a copy of the video the same night, for our records, I wrote. He never replied. I didn't think much of it at the time. I just wanted a paper trail, because something about the way he talked about previous tenants had put a small, cold pit in my stomach. Something like, "This man has done this before." The conflict escalated. When I finally moved out, new job, new city, I did the walkthrough with Gary in person. He barely looked at the apartment. He was on his phone the entire 15 minutes, grunting occasionally, saying things like, "Looks fine," and "Yeah, that's normal wear." I remember feeling almost relieved. Maybe I'd been wrong. I was wrong about being wrong. 3 weeks passed. No deposit, no email, nothing. I called. He didn't pick up. I called again the next day, straight to voicemail. On the 4th attempt, he finally answered, sounding annoyed, like I was the one interrupting his life. "Yeah, so there was damage. Paint, carpets, some stuff in the bathroom. That deposit's covering repairs." My stomach dropped, then hardened into something else entirely. "What damage?" I asked, keeping my voice level even as my pulse spiked in my ears. "I have video of the walkthrough. You said it looked fine." "Well, I'm looking at it different now," he said, and I could practically hear the shrug in his voice. "Deposit's non-refundable at this point. Talk to a lawyer if you want." Then he hung up. I sat there in my new apartment, 300 miles away, staring at my phone, feeling that particular kind of heat crawl up the back of my neck, the one that isn't quite anger yet, more like disbelief curdling in real time. $2,000. Gone because a man in a golf polo decided I was too far away and too tired to do anything about it. He said, "Talk to a lawyer if you want." So I did. The turning point. I didn't sleep much that night. I kept replaying the phone call, that laugh looping in my head like a scratched record. But somewhere around 2 a.m., staring at the ceiling, something shifted in me. The panic burned off, and underneath it was something colder and far more useful: clarity. Gary had made one critical mistake. He assumed I was just another tenant who would complain for a week and give up. He had no idea I'd spent 2 years quietly building a file on him. The move-in video, time-stamped emails, bank statements proving every on-time payment.
even the recorded voicemail he left me once complaining about problem tenants in a tone that frankly sounded like a man who'd crossed legal lines before. The next morning, I called a tenant rights attorney. I laid it all out, the video, the emails, the phone call where he casually admitted the deposit was non-refundable at this point, which, as it turns out, is not how security deposits legally work in most states. My state had a law. Landlords must return a deposit or provide an itemized list of damages within 30 days, or they owe the tenant double the deposit amount plus legal fees. Gary hadn't just stolen $2,000, he'd handed me a smoking gun. My attorney sent a demand letter. Simple, calm, factual. Return the deposit within 10 days or a lawsuit would be filed seeking double damages and attorney's fees under state law. Gary didn't respond to that either, so we filed. Here's what Gary didn't know. Once you sue a landlord in small claims or civil court, it becomes a matter of public record. And once my attorney started digging into Gary Holt's history, doing exactly what any competent lawyer does before a hearing, we found something far bigger than my $2,000. Gary had done this before. 3 other former tenants across 2 of his properties had similar stories, deposits withheld with vague, undocumented damage claims. None of them had sued. Most had just walked away, assuming it wasn't worth the fight. I wasn't going to be the 4th person who walked away. My attorney reached out to those former tenants. 2 agreed to join a small claims action, and 1 had kept a habit as obsessive as mine, time-stamped photos of her own move-out condition. Suddenly, this wasn't one disgruntled tenant crying about a deposit. This was a documented pattern of a landlord violating state tenant protection law, repeatedly, deliberately, and on the record. The hearing date was set. Gary showed up in the same golf colo energy, visibly irritated to even be there, clearly expecting to talk his way out of it the way he always had. He was not prepared for 3 tenants, 3 separate files of evidence, and a judge who read tenant protection statutes for a living. The judge didn't take long. Ruling, Gary owed each tenant double their deposit, plus court costs and attorney's fees for me alone. That was over $4,000. Combined across all 3 cases, Gary was suddenly on the hook for a number with a lot more zeros than he'd expected walking in that morning. But here's the part that turned this from a nice legal win into an actual jaw-dropping payoff. Gary didn't have the cash sitting around. He'd been running the complex on razor-thin margins, using deposit money as informal operating cash, which, again, is illegal, and which my attorney flagged directly to the court. With a judgment against him and mounting legal exposure from other tenants who started coming forward once the case became public record, Gary's lender got nervous. His property was already leveraged to its limit. Within 4 months, Gary was forced to sell the entire Brookhaven complex to cover his debts and legal judgments. I watched the for sale sign go up outside the building I used to call home, and I'm not going to pretend it didn't feel like something clicking perfectly into place. I never even had to see his face when it happened. I just got a notification that the judgment had been paid in full, funded by the sale, along with a curt 1-line email from his attorney. No apology, no admission, just money. My money, doubled, finally landing back in my account. But I heard through one of the other tenants that Gary showed up to the final closing looking like a man who'd aged 5 years in 4 months. That was enough for me. Gary thought $2,000 was small enough that I'd let it go. He thought distance and time would do his work for him. What he didn't understand is that some people don't get angry, they get organized. And when you underestimate someone who keeps receipts, you're risking not just a lawsuit, you're risking everything you built on the assumption that no one was paying attention. If this story gave you that little spark of satisfaction, smash the like button and subscribe for more stories where the underdog wins. And tell me in the comments, have you ever documented something just in case and it ended up saving you? I want to hear your story. See you in the next one.